Hello, Wood fam. This is Leo with One Happy Widow. Today we're going to talk about how grief can affect our careers or our jobs because Lord knows it has affected mine in many ways. And so I'm going to talk about kind of how that progressed in my grief journey and all the way up through my current job. So I'll give you an update on that at the end of the video. So make sure you stay tuned to find out what's the latest on my job saga. But anyway. Saga. But anyway, today we're going to talk about how, as widows and widowers, how our grief can affect us on our jobs and ultimately our careers. And so I have a list of things of basically how grief can affect our job performance, but also how it may affect where we work or how we work or what we do, or even if we have to work or not, and things like that. So we're just going to talk all about how, grief on the job. So, first of all, when you start grieving, I don't know how your job is or how normal jobs are, but I know in the teaching field that, we get like 3 to 5 days of bereavement leave if for the death of a spouse. And so I think I cannot even imagine how it would have been if I had had to go back to work after 3 to 5 days off after my husband died. I can't even fathom that. When Dewey died, it was June 17th. And so it was right after, it was like 3 weeks after school had gotten out. And so it was almost right in the middle of summer. It was about 5 weeks before I had to go back to work because I was on summer vacation. And so it was just about enough time for me to take care of a lot of the legal things that were going on and get the funeral out of the way, get paperwork started, probate, estates, all that stuff, that happens in the very beginning. And so I was able to kind of get most of that taken care of before I actually had to come back to work and feel like I could get up and function enough to go to work in the daytime. But not everybody has that luxury. My current husband, JP, he's a business owner and he's the only one that works. And so his wife died on a Wednesday and he had to go to work the next day, that Thursday and Friday, and because he had nobody else to work for him. And so he had to get up the day after his wife died and go to work, and the day after that and go to work. And then, like, I think they ended up having her funeral on a Saturday. And so, um, like, I can't even imagine how it must have been for him to, and this was an unexpected death. So, I mean, he had to, go to work the very next day. So, anyway, I'm sure that it affected him and his job too in different ways. When we finally returned to work, we've all experienced this through our grief journey, that there's something they call widow's fog or widow's brain. And it's basically where your brain is so focused on the journey of grief. It's working so hard to process your grief and to come to terms with the death of your spouse, that it's really hard to do regular stuff. We lose our keys a lot. We lose our phone a lot. We forget appointments. I I forget words a lot of the times. Like, I have trouble coming up with the words that I want to say a lot of the times. And so we experience widow's fog, and we have, depending on what our job is, it might affect our job performance because we can't think clearly, and so we may forget things. And again, if you miss appointments or you miss deadlines or you have trouble with those types of things, and I was missing my first year back to work. I missed some deadlines on paperwork because I'm a special ed teacher, and it was just I couldn't really focus enough to organize my thoughts to make sure that I was doing all the paperwork on time. And so it did not go well for me because I didn't get a whole lot of understanding in that area. And so, like, I had one lady that was like, "Don't worry about it. I know you missed the deadline on this paperwork, but I've got your back, and I'm going to help you. So don't worry. We're going to get together, and I'm gonna help you with this." And then she said, "Your secret's safe with me." And I was like, "Well, first of all, I'm not trying to keep it a secret. Um, it was just a mistake. Like, I was just struggling, right?" And so it's not like I was trying to get her to cover for me or to keep my secret, but anyway, next thing you know, a few days later, I get a call to go see the principal in her office with the same woman who the secret was safe with her. She had gone to the principal and basically told her that I had not done some of this paperwork on time and was over the date on that. And so, yeah, I got a little reprimanding on that and had to come up with a plan with a, write up a plan for documenting how I was going to, whether it be work on Saturdays, work after work, work long hours or whatever, I needed to come up with a plan on how I was going to accomplish catching up with all that paperwork. And so that was not a good thing. Like, I was like, well, if I could manage my time to get this stuff done and work on Saturdays and work after, I wouldn't have got behind on the paperwork to begin with. Like, I'm trying to be a parent here, right? But anyway, so that's how the brain fog affected me. Um, so also, we tend to become disengaged, like things that maybe were important to us before are suddenly not important to us anymore. And so I noticed that I did not have as much of a passion for my job as I did before because my focus was in a different place. I was just trying to survive as a parent. I was just trying to survive as a teacher. I couldn't devote as much of my emotional energy towards the students that when they needed me. And so it just, my heart was just not in it as much as it was before. And so it's just really hard for me to be emotionally invested in my job. And honestly, I just didn't care about it as much as I used to. And so that was like a little bit of a disconnect there. So if you don't know my story, when Dewey died, we had 4 children still living at home. And so when I went back to work, we went from a 2-parent family to a 1-parent family, and I was already working. He was already discharged from the military on a medical discharge, and so he had been the stay-at-home dad. So he was doing the laundry and the cooking and the toting the kids places and stuff, and I was already working. And so I had to take over all the responsibilities of parenting plus working, and my kids were grieving. So that just put in a whole nother complication, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then the third is possibly working too much. Sometimes we use our work as a distraction from grief. I think I was very guilty of this. I stayed really, really busy. I still stay really busy. Part of it is because it is a distraction from grief and from stress and from anxiety and things. It's hard to stress about your life when you're busy just doing stuff all the time. Part of it has to do with my personality. I'm a type A. And so I feel like I always have to be moving forward and being productive and doing something. Part of it is I have ADHD and I have a hard time turning my brain off. And so I always have to be learning something or thinking about something or figuring out something. And so it's really hard for me to shut down. And so I think that sometimes we can work too much to, to distract ourselves from the grief. But what happens is when we work too much, we don't rest and we burn out. So we either burn out like crash and burn, like we get sick, or we burn out like we have no energy. We burn out, we have anxiety attack. We burn out, we have emotional breakdowns and meltdowns. And so it's just something happens after you overwork yourself that the ending to that scenario is never a good one. So that could affect our job. We could be down and out. And so when you're grieving, you might get sick a lot, or when you're grieving, you might cry a lot, and you might not have the will to make it into work a lot of days, and so you might miss a lot of work. So you might absenteeism may be a problem where it wasn't before. If you have crying spells where you have a hard time getting out of bed or finding the will to get up and get in the shower and get yourself to work, if grief turns into a depression, or you get stuck in a grief cycle that you can't seem to move forward through, it could really affect your ability to even be able to get up and go to work. And so that can be an issue and affect your career. Grief affects your immune system. And so when we're grieving, our body is on working overtime, trying to handle the anxiety and the physical aspects of grief. And so our immune system tends to take a hit on that. And so it's easier for us to get sick. And so it's, colds, flus, bronchitis, asthma. When COVID came through, COVID did a lot of things to a lot of people. And so when there's illnesses going around, we might be more likely to catch them, and we might take longer to recover from them. In addition, sometimes we don't take as good of care of ourselves as we're supposed to. And so that makes it easier for us to get sick, or it takes longer for us to heal because we're not eating properly. We're not resting properly. We're not emotionally available or emotionally as healthy as we could be or as strong as we could be. And so all those things kind of, all balled up together could cause us to have excessive absences, which obviously is going to affect our workplace, our work productivity, and could possibly affect the other people that we work with, because with some jobs, a lot of jobs, if you're not there, your coworkers sort of have to pick up the slack that you're leaving behind, and so that puts an extra burden on your coworkers as well. Then that makes them have animosity towards you, and you see how the snowball just kind of starts to grow. When you have lost your spouse, it could be a matter of your purpose might change. You might start having different goals for yourself as you move forward. You might have had this life planned out for you and your spouse and a future and all these plans, and then suddenly it's just you, or it's just you and your kids. And so your goals might change. The things that you might have wanted to do with your spouse moving forward, taking trips or having hobbies or doing businesses or whatever, you might not have those same goals anymore. Your goals might change. And so that might mean that your career is not meeting the same needs as it was before. Or maybe you are going to choose a different career path because you want to do something different or move somewhere. And so there's just some different changes in your goals and your career trajectory that happen, or that could happen, as a result of not only your grief, but as a result of how much your life changes when your spouse is no longer an active part of your life. And so you're making decisions now based on what you want to do, or what you need to do, or what you need to do for your kids, and not considering your spouse anymore in that decision might mean those decisions change. And so your your career path may look a lot different. Your career path, you might not have even had a career path until your spouse died, and maybe you were a stay-at-home parent and now you have to be the breadwinner. You have to go back and get a job so that you can pay the bills and raise your children. And so that's a huge change in a career shift. And so that's something that a lot of people have to deal with, especially when they're younger and they become widowed. And then the last two are mostly talking about younger parents and parents who are still raising children. And so this is how my career path has changed a lot since I've become widowed. First of all, you are parenting children who are now grieving the loss of their parent. So these aren't just your kids anymore. These are your kids who've lost a parent. Those children post widowhood are much different children than they were pre widowhood. And I've made a few videos about that, but they're just not the same. Emotionally, they're not the same. They have different needs. They need you more than they did before. Emotionally, they're dealing with a lot. There's probably a lot more um, therapy sessions, and just a lot more attention needs to be given to them because they have these needs that they didn't have before emotionally. On top of just being kids, sometimes it's just hard to be a kid sometimes, right? And on top of that, you have one less parent to help you. So where you had two parents that are working together, to try to raise the kids, now you just have one, and so you're trying to do everything. And so this is how it happened for me. I went from, having four kids and working and him being at home, to having four kids and me working and then me being at home and trying to raise them. So in that amount of time, my oldest daughter, who had already graduated from high school and moved back home in order to help me with the kids while Dewey was sick, well, she was still there. And so in the 1 to 2 years after he died, a lot of changes happened with the kids. My oldest daughter got pregnant, and so it was unplanned. And so then we were planning a wedding. I'm trying to build a house, and so that was a lot of stress and anxiety too. My next oldest child had just gotten her license, and was basically testing the boundaries of teenage stuff, and was starting to get into trouble and starting to act out because of her grief and her feelings. And plus, she was a teenager. And so she was running with, kids and making bad decisions and getting in trouble at school. And she was a student at the school where I was teaching. And so that was affecting my career because she was like, well, do you know who I am? My mom works here. So she was expecting me to kind of get her out of some trouble that she was getting herself into. And that was affecting my job. And I could not do those things for her. So that was another struggle. My son at the time was not handling his grief very well, and it resulted in a lot of anxiety. And he did not like having to go to school. He was a homeschool kid, and his dad was his teacher for years. And so as soon as Daddy died, he had to go to regular school for the first time in years. And he did not want to. He liked being at home doing homeschool. So he was doing a lot of avoidance things. He was missing the bus, not on accident, and hiding in the woods all day. And then we didn't know where he was. And he would go to school and hide in the bathroom for hours and hours because he didn't want to go to the classes of the teachers he didn't like. He was failing his classes, even though he's a genius, because he just did not, he had some perfectionism problems and anxiety problems and didn't want to turn in his work. And so just affecting him that way. My youngest daughter was, her grief had manifested in physical illness. And so she was vomiting a lot. Whenever she got anxious, she would vomit. Whenever she vomited, they would call me to come pick her up and take her home from school. And so I was missing a lot of work because I had to go pick her up and take her home. So it was just really hard for me to be a good teacher and a good parent because I was being split in both directions. Like I was having to try to devote my attention to my job, but also devote my attention to my children. And my children were grieving, and I was grieving, and I didn't have any support on top of all that. So you can see where you're just juggling more and more balls, and just waiting for them all to kind of drop at the same time. And so as a result, it affected my job where I already was. And so then I will go through the process of how my career trajectory, my career path has changed several times since Dewey has died as a result of all these things kind of, going together. So I was a full-time teacher when he died. And like I said, my second daughter was a student there at the school where I taught. After the second year of that, I was just so overwhelmed. I was not able to be a good mom or a good teacher. And so I requested to be put on part time. I thought, well, if I could just work part time, then I can devote more time to being a parent and I can be a better teacher while I'm here. And I think I can afford working half time. It would have been tough, but anyway. And I was told that if I wanted a part time position doing what I was doing, that I needed to find it in another school. They did not offer me part time. They didn't have it. They didn't even want to try it. I don't think they wanted me to stay anyway because I had become this thorn in their side with this problem kid that was there that I was trying to, advocate for. It was just turning into a place that it just wasn't working out for any of us. And so, I mean, it just so happened that right across town in the same county at the other high school, there was a job opening up for part time in the exact position that I was working. It was special ed math at the high school, and they just wanted part time. And I thought, man, how perfect is that? And so I interviewed for that job and I got the position. And then, so that next year I went over and I taught, I was doing the same job, but it was only half day. So I went in at 8 and I was done at 12. I would go to my workout place. I would come home. I was there in the afternoons. It was working out. My kids were old enough to where the two high school kids were, neither one of them could go to regular school anymore. So they were at home doing online school, and that worked out better for them. My youngest daughter was still in regular school, and so if and when I had to go pick her up early from some illness moments, I was able to do that. So it seemed to work out just fine until my youngest daughter started having so many issues that she could not go to school anymore either. I don't want to get into details because it's some of it's private stuff, but it's just emotional stuff that was affecting her. She was just not able to stay in school. Various things happened. She needed to be at home and do online school, but she was too young to be able to do it by herself. At the time, she was only in sixth grade. And so, in order for her to be at home schooling where she needed to be, I needed to be at home with her schooling also. And so, I had to quit my job in the middle of the school year. That same job that I had taken part time, the next year they offered it to me full time. And I felt like, okay, I think I can do it. So, I had gone back to full time doing that same job at that new high school. So it was, and she was at the school right next to me, or the buildings were attached. So she was at the middle school that was attached to my high school and not doing very well at all. So again, this was affecting my job. So I had to break contract, which that's what it's called when you are teaching. You don't quit, you don't put in a notice, you don't resign. You break contract. Teachers have to work for the whole school year. They sign a contract saying that they will, and when they don't, it's actually a breach of contract, which it's against the law. I mean, you can't just quit when you're teaching, which I think is I don't agree with it, but that's the way it is. So anyway, you can request to be released from your contract, but they don't have to release you. And so, of course, I went to my principal and I explained everything and told them what was going on and what I needed. And they, it was a medical reason. And so they did um, agree to release me. So they didn't hold it against my certificate. They did not fine me, which they could have. They didn't do any of that. They allowed me to get out of my contract. So that happened over Christmas break. So my youngest daughter ended up doing online school at home. I ended up getting a teaching position at that school online at home. So I was teaching from home. She was schooling from home. It was nice, but the school system where I taught it was kind of like Disneyland for teaching, right? It was in a really nice um, county where they had high expectations for the students academically, behaviorally, and otherwise all around. We had lots of parent involvement, right? We had lots of parent involvement, almost too much so. Like sometimes parents really want to get over involved, but you know what? They cared about their kids' education. They were involved, and so it was probably the best county that I had ever taught in, and I taught in many. So it was just an awesome, awesome place to work. Both of those schools where I worked, I loved the teachers that I worked with. I loved the parents. I loved the students. They were nice and kind. It was awesome. So then when I went to the online school, it was not as awesome. And so I was teaching some classes I wasn't really interested in teaching, not the way that I wanted to. It was just wasn't perfect, you know what I mean? But it was what I needed at the time. And so my daughter decided after that year she wanted to try to go to back to the regular school. And so since we had moved, she's going to a different school. So we put her in back in the regular school to try it. And for the rest of that school year, she was okay. And then so she decided that's what she wanted to do. So I decided to go back to the regular school too in our area because I wasn't crazy about like I said, the online classes and how it went. So you got to figure here, I was working at a county that was like here, and I went to this online job that's like, yeah, it's like a step down. You know what I mean? As far as work environment and how much I liked it and just that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I'll just go back to the brick and mortar. I contacted my old job, but even though they had never filled the position, I think I was too much of a liability. And so they weren't really interested in giving me my old job back. So I was like, okay. So I took this other job, a teaching job, and in this local area. And I hate to say, but it was just the most difficult job that I have ever worked, I think, in my life. It just was not, it wasn't the classes that I wanted. The workload was terrible. The students were generally difficult, just difficult. I'm just going to put it that way. It was just hard. It was a hard, hard job. And I worked 10 or 12 hours a day. I worked my butt off all the time. And I always felt like I was behind. I could never get anything done, finished and done and completed. And my kids suffered. My husband suffered. I suffered. It was just generally terrible. I hated it. I hated every day that I went to work. And I cried almost every day on the way home. But I made it through the school year, and I knew I was not going to come back to that school. Now, the people that I worked with, my coworkers, the teachers that I worked with, my department, fabulous people. Loved them. Loved my supervisor, my department chair, loved the teachers that I worked with in my department. Fantastic people. So it wasn't about that. It was just the environment of the school and just, it's just it was a different environment. And so it's just really hard. It was a tough school. So I knew I just could not return to that school. So here we go, trying to find a new place. And so that was last school year. And so we fast forward to this school year that just started on August 1st. And I had gotten a promotion actually to a middle school to where I was going to be the department chair. They call it the lead teacher. And so it's basically the head of the department over all the special ed, the whole special ed department. So all those teachers, I would be their lead teacher. And so there was no teaching responsibilities, like no classrooms, no classes, no lessons. I was just helping the rest of the teachers with paperwork. So I didn't have to worry if the kids were off the chain because I didn't have to deal with the kids. Like I didn't have any students. I just had these teachers to help and support. And so, but I didn't really know the job. So I was having to learn, trial by fire. So I was learning as I went. It was really busy, but I was really liking it. Like I was thriving in that place. And so I went, we went back in end of July to do our pre-planning and stuff. School started August 1st. Everything's going great. I'm trying to figure out the job. I'm working hard, but I'm, motivated. And guess what? So my youngest daughter kind of starts a repeat of what she had done 2 years ago when she was in sixth grade. And this time I saw it coming. I kind of saw it before it even started, manifesting. And so I knew that it wouldn't be long before we were facing a similar situation again. So that brings us to current day. And I could not tell you guys what has gone on until it happened because of contracts and being released and legal stuff or whatever. I could not really tell you what I was trying to do or planning to do until it was done because I didn't know what was going to happen. So basically I had to ask to be released from my contract again, like right after school started. And I had to put in a resignation basically that says I'm resigning in 2 weeks, please release me. And if they had decided not to release me, I was still going to resign and break contract, and then some repercussions could have happened after that. But I had no choice. Like I could not continue to work in the building because Dallas needed to come back home and go back to online school. And so they waited until the very last day of the 2 weeks after I put in that, last day of work, September 1st, which was Friday. And so 2 days ago, they finally, on that very last day at 9 o'clock, they had a meeting and they agreed to release me from my contract. I had medical documentation that I needed to be at home with my child, but they still didn't have to honor it. But they did. And it put them in a big lurch because they don't have anybody to lead that department now. And now they have to try to open the job and find somebody else. But they released me. And on Tuesday, which is the day after Labor Day, I start back at the online teaching and they have hired me back. So I'll be back to the online job that I had before I went, back to the building, same school, different position slightly. Hopefully it's going to be something that I enjoy. Still high school, still math, still special ed. And so that just goes to show you that since Dewey has died, I worked at one high school, another high school, online school, another high school, a middle school, and back to online school. 6 jobs, 6 different teaching positions in 6 years since he has died. That's hard to get ahead in a career when you can't seem to keep a job. Like, I haven't been fired from any job. Like, I have not been let go. I have not been non-renewed. I have simply had to request out or move or not renew a contract or go somewhere else. I mean, the only move that was made not because of my kid, or my grieving situation or whatever, was when I went from that high school to the department chair job. And that was for myself because I just couldn't go back to that school. So, so basically, you can see how my career has been affected by my grief. And on Tuesday, I start this new job again, and I'm kind of looking forward to it because I'm going to have some extra time to be able to devote to the channel, the YouTube channel, and some things like that. But it was not. I didn't want to have to make the decision. Like, it turned out to be okay, and I'm looking forward to it. But I didn't want to be put in a position where I had to ask out of my contract again and stress about if they were going to fine me, if they were going to try to take my certificate, if they're going to put sanctions on me with the state, and all these things that they could have done if they didn't release me from my contract. And so it's been a stressful few weeks. And but it all turned out to be okay. We've done a lot of praying. God has, worked things out for us, and I think it's going to be for the best for everybody. But I mean, it has really affected all of us. And so it's going to be okay. But you can see, like, this is, I don't want this to be the norm that I have to keep changing jobs and changing jobs all the time. My plan is to keep this job until I retire. And if I retire in a year, or if I retire in 9 years or 10 years when I'm 60, whatever. I got anywhere from 1 to 10 years to go. So at some point, I don't know how long I'll be able to do it, but I'm just going to hang in there as long as I can. All right, so that's going to do it for this week about careers. Post down below if if grief has affected your career and how it has done so, whether it be a parent or whether it just be your job. And speaking of job stuff, our career stuff also affects our finances, and so I do have a deal for you. I will link this in the description below. But if you would like to have a free 45-minute online consultation for financial services, I have that available. I have that available for you through Money Pickle. And so it's moneypickle.com/one happy widow, but it is case sensitive. So make sure the happy, and the widow, the OHW is capitalized, or it won't take you to the right place. But it's a free 45-minute consultation. There's no obligation, nothing like that. You just tell them what kind of situation you're in, what kind of things that you might need, and they will tell you what kind of services that you might benefit from, or they will answer some of the questions that you might have during that financial online consultation. So that is a free gift to you from Money Pickle. So thank you very much to them. And if you need other services, I have all kinds of resources that I'm putting onto my website that it's still being added. So feel free to check out onehappywidow.com and just kind of click around on the website and see if there's anything there that might be of interest to you. So if this has been a valuable tool for you, a valuable video for you, go ahead and subscribe and click on that bell so that you don't miss any future videos. And I guess we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.